Today we focus on the end of Chapter 15 in the Rise of Skywalker novel by Ray Carson. I was going to just skip ahead to when the fighting starts in the book, but I just couldn't do that quite yet because the scenes of the Resistance characters all getting ready to go fight are just so powerful that they are definitely worth reading aloud and discussing. On page 193, the author does something that is important to the plot of the story or the film because she needs to find a way to let us know how the heroes can stop the Sith Star Destroyer fleet. This is a literary technique, actually, called exposition. Exposition is when the characters start talking about some important background information that you need to know for the plot, and they are mainly doing this just to let the reader or the viewer of the film know the details so that everything will make sense later. A writer needs to find a good place to do this exposition that will make sense in the story and not get too boring. You can't just have C-3PO turn to the camera and say, "And now let me explain to all of you for the next several minutes all the details everyone will need to know. Ready?" No, that would be kind of weird and it would get boring. So, the way the screenwriters and the novel writer of Rise of Skywalker decided to use exposition was to have a bunch of different Resistance heroes all quickly discuss the attack that they are preparing for as just before they go into battle. "As long as those Star Destroyers are on Exegol, we can hit them," Finn was saying as Chewie joined the meeting, along with Lando and the droids. "Hit them how?" Tice asked. The pilot stood beside her wife, Commander Daisy. The two were not prone to public displays of affection, but it was obvious to Poe they took courage in each other's presence. "They can't activate their shields until they leave atmosphere," Rose explained. "Which isn't easy on Exegol," Poe added. "Ships that size need help taking off. Nav can't tell which way's up out there." Tice asked, "So how do the ships take off?" "They use a signal from a navigation tower like this one." Poe flipped the holo display to a new image, an obelisk-like tower jutting from the flat ground, spreading its array like a metal flower opening its petals. "Except they won't," Finn said, "because air team's gonna find the tower and ground team's gonna blast it." "Ground team?" Vanek asked. He was an A-Wing pilot and one of Poe's personal recruits. "I got an idea about that," Finn said. Poe gave him a nod. Finn's plan for the ground team just might work, though it was a bit unconventional. It would definitely take the enemy by surprise. Once the tower's down, their fleet is stuck in Atmo for just minutes. No shields, no way out. And Rose has an idea about that, Poe said. "Rose?" "My team's been analyzing the Sith Star Destroyers," Rose said. "In order to kill a planet with those cannons, they need an enormous power source." "They're drawing on the main reactors," Vanek said. Rose nodded. "We think hitting a cannon might take down the whole ship." "That's our chance," said Lando. He'd changed his Aki-Aki garb for bright clothing and a knee-length cape. Poe really liked his cape. He'd have to ask about it when this was all over. "There aren't enough of us," Nien Nunb protested in his native Solstice. Really nice to see Nien Nunb still around, by the way. He's been helping fight against the bad guys since Return of the Jedi when he was Lando's co-pilot. He's also in the video games like Battlefront. So cool. Great character. Poe nodded at the pilot, saying, "That's where Lando and Chewie come in. They're going to take the Falcon to the core systems, send out a call for help to anybody listening." Under Leia's direction, Poe had been laying the groundwork for months. Allies were out there, and if anyone could smooth talk them into helping now, it was Lando Calrissian, friend to General Leia, hero of the rebellion. Poe continued, "We've got friends out there. They'll come if they know there's hope." Everyone started to protest. They all remembered Crate as painfully as he did. Poe thought of Zori's words and said, "They will. The First Order wins by making us think we're alone. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them." "Leia never gave up," Finn said, "and neither will we. We're going to show them we're not afraid." "What our mothers and fathers fought for," Poe said, thinking of his own parents, Shara Bay and Kes Dameron, who had sacrificed so much to fight for the Rebel Alliance. We will not let it die. Not today. Today we make our last stand. For the galaxy. For Leia. For everyone we've lost. They've taken enough of us, Finn added. Now we take the war to them. Around Poe and Finn, people were nodding. Rose's face was rapt. May the Force be with us, she said, with feeling. May the Force be with us, Connix repeated. Then several called out at once. May the Force be with us! Some powerful themes come up in that inspiring scene with the Resistance, which you hopefully heard in the reading or saw on the bottom of your screen. Notice the mention of Poe's parents, Shara Bay and Casdameron. Mentioning them by name actually connects us with a different Star Wars story that you can read. There's an excellent graphic novel called Shattered Empire that tells the story of Poe's parents, who were rebels back in the original trilogy when Luke, Han, Leia, and other famous rebel heroes defeated the Empire. Poe connecting back to them is a great text-to-text moment and also adds to the very inspirational tone created by author Ray Carson as the Resistance is preparing to fight. And having everyone say, "May the Force be with us," is also just such an excellent way to create this inspirational tone for the scene. Another tone that the author sets by writing like this is nostalgia. Star Wars fans will feel nostalgic thinking back to the original trilogy of films and stories, and even a character can feel nostalgic as we see in an extra scene of Lando entering his old ship, the Millennium Falcon. I'm on page 195 now. Stepping foot inside the Falcon again was going to hurt. Lando took a deep breath, gathered his cloak, and climbed the ramp. He entered the curved corridor. To his right were the cockpit and lounge. To his left was the cargo hold. He loved that hold. Lando had transported legal cargo too, though it had most often been cover for more valuable, less legitimate goods. Often, though, his cargo hold had remained empty, or at least not quite full. He'd thrown a lot of great parties in that hold. He turned right and headed toward the lounge. Chewbacca seemed to understand that Lando needed to take his time, so he motioned that he'd be waiting for him in the cockpit. "Thanks, Chewie." The hologram board and lounge seat were exactly the way he remembered them, though the stuffing in the seat was starting to come out at one seam, an easy patch. He smiled. Han and Chewie had always had too many things on their minds to notice something so inconsequential. Back when he owned the Falcon, he would have fixed this right away. Behind the lounge was the guest bunk, a place that he'd slept often in the days of the New Republic, and he felt a pang so sharp it was like a stab to his chest. Leia had always managed to find some essential errand for him, and Lando had ended up an official second mate on a ship that used to be his. He missed them both so much. It had been a manageable sorrow when he'd been on Pisana with the Aki-Aki, knowing that his friends were out there somewhere alive. But now that they were gone... Lando passed the galley and headed toward the captain's cabin. When he had owned the Falcon, the ship could only sleep 4 comfortably, 2 in the guest bunk, 2 in the captain's cabin. Then that cheater Han had won the ship from him in a fateful game of sabacc, and the first thing he'd done was retrofit the cape closet to create a first mate's bunk for Chewie and a hidden compartment. Lando had been outraged. It seemed so silly now. He peered into the captain's cabin. The room contained a triple bunk now, because Han wanted to squeeze more people in. For a while, he'd thought he'd take his new family on a run or two. Lando understood. He'd have given anything to have his little girl by his side as he traveled the galaxy on the Lady Luck, but it was not to be for either of them. He stepped toward Chewie's bunk and the compartment it was hiding for a closer look, but then he hesitated. The Wookiee was waiting for him in the cockpit, but surely he wouldn't begrudge his old buddy a peek inside? It used to be his cape closet. Lando reached across the bunk for the rivet that was really a button, and the panel whisked open. The first thing that hit him was the smell of Wookiee fur. Not unpleasant once you were used to it, but a little surprising just the same. No trace of Lando's closet remained. Inside was a small metal shelf, and on the shelf was a hologram disc, the edges worn with use. It was none of his business, probably a treasured memory from his homeworld of Kashyyyk. Chewie was over 2 centuries old, with a long history of family and friends Lando knew nothing about. He started to leave, but stopped. He couldn't resist. He was a scoundrel, after all. Lando reached forward and flicked the hologram switch. An image of Chewbacca himself was projected onto the disc in soft blue. He held a small human child in his arms. Lando leaned closer. It was Ben, dark-haired, chubby-fisted. He kicked his legs and yanked on Chewie's fur, shrieking in delight. Chewbacca just cuddled him close, making a sound that was almost like a purr. Lando flicked off the hologram. He couldn't watch anymore. The First Order had taken so much from them, from all of them. It was time for Lando to fight back. He left Chewie's quarters going over their plan in his head. He couldn't rally their allies individually in the short time they had, so Beaumont and Connix had plotted a course that would take them past First Order jammers, where they would transmit a call for help at strategic coordinates. A few key figures, like the former Mon Calamari ambassador, would be contacted directly and given the special Calrissian touch, but mostly their goal was to jump, transmit, over and over until time ran out. That's a very nostalgic moment for Lando walking through the Falcon, and for Star Wars fans too, and a very emotional scene with the hologram of little Ben and Chewie. Cleverly added in there by the author to help us remember that there is good in him, that Kylo can be Ben again. Also, there is a great text-to-text connection with the movie Solo, a Star Wars story. When Lando thinks about losing the Falcon to Han in a game of Sabacc, that takes us right back to that movie or book, which I highly recommend seeing and reading. Then we also get a little bit more exposition as the author, through Lando, explains to us how they are going to keep jumping through hyperspace everywhere they can and transmitting the message about needing to stop the Emperor and the First Order at Exegol. It's also cool that the author mentions they're going to avoid jammers that the First Order uses to stop messages from getting out. If you read details about The Last Jedi, that's the reason why when they sent that message out from Crate hoping people would come to help, nobody came. The messages never got to anybody. They were jammed by the First Order, and that's why nobody came to help. So they're going to avoid the jammers and send Lando and Chewie out there to get people. Before we finish today, I just want to read a quick description when Rey, on Exegol now, sees Emperor Palpatine in person for the first time. The diction that the author uses here is very impressive. Diction means word choices that are used in the writing. This is the end of chapter 15 on page 202.
"Long have I waited,"
came a voice from her nightmares, deep, resonant, and slow, as though he had all the time in the galaxy. Rey turned toward the voice. A robed figure materialized, suspended from strange machinery. Her grip on the lightsaber tightened when she saw his face. He was monstrous, repulsive, with red-rimmed eyes, skin barely clinging to his skeletal form, disintegrating into oozing sores. One of his hands had half rotted away. It was her grandfather, his spirit trapped in an artificial form, his power too devastating to contain. "My grandchild has come home," he added triumphantly. He radiated evil, but her feet twitched toward him. She could not look away. There was something oddly compelling about him. Wow, that's some really gross, evil, creepy word choice there. Powerful diction, but do disgust me. Okay, I guess that's all for this episode. See you next time when the fight, one with lightsabers and one with ships in space, will begin.